Namaste and welcome to the Bharat Varta podcast. Much has changed in Kashmir since the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019. We did a podcast earlier last year featuring Sunanda Vashist and Mr. Sreemoy Talukdar, detailing some of the political and social changes that have happened since. Today, we'll hear from a couple of prominent voices in the Kashmiri Pandit community. It's a pleasure to be joined by Mr. Surinder Kaul and Mr. Virinder Kaul, who are both activists from the global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora. We'll hear from them on recent developments in Kashmir and the significance of those events. So, without further ado, welcome Surinder ji and Varinder ji for thank you so much for making it to the podcast.
Namaste, Roshan ji. Thanks for having me.
Our privilege to host you both. Indeed, there is a lot that we can talk about. I thought a good place would be to start with a very broad opening question. So, Surinder ji, how do you see the Kashmir situation today, 32 years after the Kashmiri Pandits were forced out of the valley? Maybe you could also provide a brief background of your own story during that time.
Well, this is a very open-ended question, and I can spend hours and hours on this. But for the benefit of the audience, kindly allow me to build a context to this question so that audience will be able to understand this fully.
Sure.
The erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh basically had three regions. One was the Jammu region, Ladakh region, and the Kashmir region. Now, if we see the area-wise distribution, Ladakh division constituted around 50% of the area, Jammu division 26% of the area, and Kashmir division 16% of the area. Now, if you see the contested legislative assembly representation in these three divisions, we had total of 87 seats. And out of those 87 seats, we had 47 seats allocated to Kashmir division. We had almost 36 seats allocated to Jammu division and mere 4 seats allocated to Ladakh division. Now, as regards the population is concerned, Kashmir division is predominantly a Muslim dominance with almost 97-98% of Muslims. Jammu division is predominantly Hindu with 65% of Hindus, and Ladakh division is predominantly Buddhist dominance. Now, if we see the imbalance between the legislative representation, the area distribution, and on top of that, if we see the funding, the allocation of the budget in these three different regions, so Kashmir division used to get almost 60% of all the funds, whether it is government of India or the state governments. Jammu division used to get nearly 30% less than that, and Ladakh division less than 10%. So this was the allocation, representation. So now what happens over the period of time, the whole policies were centered towards Kashmir. It was all Kashmir-centric. The representation and the chief ministers and the powers was very hugely represented from Kashmir. So this created a hegemony. With the result, it created a discord between all these three divisions of the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. So with the result in last 32 years, as all of us know that in 89, this terrorism started coming, and our community, like other minorities like Sikhs and Christians, they became victims of genocide and ethnic cleansing. So this was the worst genocide in independent India, which perhaps we didn't take cognizance of until last several years. We saw that what happened with us. Now in these last 32 years, this discord, this disharmony started building up. There was a political vacuum. Now that created these separatist voices, the anti-India voices, they started becoming much more stronger. And there was a nexus between the political elite, the political system, the bureaucrats, and these separatists, and competition, who is more anti-Indian. So this started creating and increasing every year to the extent that terrorism became an industry, a full-fledged industry in the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. With the result, huge exploitation of the masses, lot of money was being exchanged, lot of funding was taking places, and this created that sort of a mass hysteria, where in the law of the land, the writ of the law had gone to the winds. Now, the Indian successive governments in India also created a breeding ground for all these separatists and terrorists to flourish. So there was no accountability on the front of governance in the erstwhile state of J&K. There was massive and rampant corruption. There was civil liberties were paralyzed. The law of the land was in jeopardy, and it was very difficult to manage this state. And it created a sort of a challenge, a big challenge to manage the state the way it was happening. And during these 32 years, we saw that our symbols of civilization, our institutions, were encroached, were destroyed, and that whole thing has still been going on. And these were the factors, all the things that were going way out of control, and very wrong policies of government of India, very wrong policies of think tank send a strong message to these separatist elements as well as the politicians that you can do whatever you have to do. You have all the license to do. So that is perhaps in nutshell I could tell you what has been going on in all these 32 years.
Right. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that lends a lot of context to our discussion going forward. So one of the defining moments, I suppose, in the last 3 decades of Kashmir's history was when the government of India revoked the special status and removed Article 370. Many felt that it was long due, but still others were a little less enthusiastic about it. So, Virinder ji, what are some of the changes that have happened since that time?
I think this is by far the boldest decision any Prime Minister of India has taken in J&K so far. And we really commend Prime Minister Modi for this, and no praise is enough for this great leader. Finally, we have one nation, one law, and one constitution after 70 long years. And as Dr. Surinder ji just now told you, the situation was so complex that it took almost a genius to cut through all this jigsaw puzzle. We Kashmiri Pandits have been demanding for repeal of this repugnant act most vociferously since our exodus in 1990. We have been asking for such more bold steps to be taken, and we understand these are also in the making now. Let me tell you what are the changes that have happened, which are very, very significant. More than 180 laws of the state have been scrapped and replaced with the laws of India. You'll be surprised to know that the J&K had its own law. And this created a confusion where the regulatory and the statutory authorities of Government of India had no entry into the state. So that is how Dr. Surinder ji told you that the corruption and all was like a family business, and there was no checks and balances. So now what has happened, this has ensured now complete amalgamation of the state in the country by repealing these laws and replacing with the Government of India laws. It is now just like any state like Tamil Nadu or Karnataka, where any Indian can decide to live and prosper. Administration will be now more systematic. Now, Constitution of India is flowing freely in the union territory. And top it all, now it is a union territory, not a state. So, central government has got direct, access into the area. So, finally, this has now, the most important thing which I wanted to say is that the minorities, the women of the union territory, they were discriminated. The refugees of Pakistan who came to via Rajouri and settled in the Jammu region, they have got their domicile after the repeal of this Article 370. They have been agitating since 1947. They were not recognized as citizens of India till this law was repealed. You can imagine. The women of the state, if they would marry somebody from outside the state, they would have to give up their domicile certificate of the state, and they would lose all inheritance and all property rights. However, if a local J&K guy would marry a woman from outside, she could never get a domicile certificate of J&K. You can realize now in the same home, there were one couple living, one is a citizen and one is not a citizen. So you can imagine what kind of injustice was prevailing. Scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, they had no voice. So these are the things. Civil servants, IAS and IPS officers, and many Government of India cadre, they worked when they were allocated the J&K state. They would spend all their life in the state, and after 30-35 years of distinguished service, they could not settle down in the state. They could not buy a piece of land. So all that is gone now. I think that is a very, very significant decision. Businessmen will be emboldened now to invest in industry. Earlier, no businessman would dare to come because they were not sure how the state would react. Now, we need a lot of investment in industry, healthcare, education, agrarian sector. Now I feel the J&K government has recently come up with a new industrial policy. So it's a very proactive policy, and there have been roadshows from the government of J&K now to invite investments in the Union Territory. GKPD is also playing a very vital role in that. I think Dr. Surinder ji will tell you in the forthcoming. So I will stop it here now, right now.
Right. No, I mean, definitely, I think as many have acknowledged, India has formally recognized Jammu and Kashmir as part of the country itself, right? And has provided equal rights as with any other part of the country. So, Surinder Kaul ji, coming to the present day, what has been the role of the global Kashmiri Pandit diaspora? And could you talk about some of your recent events? Like you did the Ek Saath event as well, right? Which was a success. So could you talk about those things as well?
Yes, sure. Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora came into existence in year 2008. But we were not going all out in the public domain, even though we were in public. At that time, we were restricted to creating awareness about what happened in Kashmir with our community and what are the challenges. And it was a persistent educational platform wherein we used to invite people from think tank, not only from India, but globally. And we used to do political outreach. But for last 4 or 5 years, we were into intense research as to what happened. Like any other community which has become victim of genocide and ethnic cleansing, it was a minuscule community. It got scattered all over the India and globe. So it took us time to coordinate and establish connections with all those because we didn't have any communications. Because if you remember that 30 years ago, we didn't have social media and very limited people had telephones. We didn't have cell phones. So there was a communication barrier. So I must say that it took us almost 2 decades to understand what happened with us because we established contact, created a database that how many people were killed. And we were amazed to see, we were shocked to see almost 1,600 people from our community and other minorities were killed in a cold blood. And perhaps this was the driving force that something needs to be done. We have several organizations within our community, but there was not a complete unanimity. Everybody was working in silos. So our attempt was to bring in all those organizations as well as the civil society together as a one single plan. And we succeeded to a large extent. And first was the phase of research, what happened, personal stories, and then assess the damage that we had. Now, based on the information that we have been getting after data collection, we projected it as a civil society of Kashmiri Pandits all over the globe with cohesiveness with other organizations who have been working in silence. Secondly, our challenge was creating an awareness all over the globe. We have representatives in UK, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Canada, US, you name it, as well as in India. So our emphasis was to outreach with the lawmakers, think tanks in different countries, with human rights organizations. And we have been doing, that's our constant endeavor. The Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora's mission is basically to bring the whole community as one platform so that our minuscule community has more say, so that one community, one voice, and a very strong voice. And perhaps we also do outreach with the, as I said, lawmakers in different countries. We do outreach with political parties in India. We do outreach with the government. And, we met Honorable Prime Minister in September of 2019 in USA during the Howdy Modi event. We met Honorable Home Minister Amit Shah ji February of 2020, and we did meet several leaders from political parties of all shades and also think tank. So this is basically creating a consensus and apprising the government, in addition to creating awareness about the aspirations of the community. And we underwent a very hectic exercise in year 2017, 2018, wherein we brainstormed with all organizations, think tank within our community, to create a consensus document that is agreed by most of the organizations. And I'm very happy to report that we created a consensus document about our return module, about what are the steps that government should take prior to that. And uh, we that document was created, that was signed by 15,000 members of the community, that was vetted by almost every organization of our community at a global level. We also have different projects, like we make our representation to NHRC, we make representation to the delimitation panel. We have a task force which is completely dedicated towards the return and rehabilitation module, which is being handled by experts. Then we also interact about the temples and shrines and our institutions in the valley, how to renovate, because there is rampant encroachment, destruction, and how to rebuild that. And we are in touch with the government agencies through various channels. And basically, after the abrogation of Article 370, there was a lot of disinformation campaign at the global level. What is India doing? It's doing excesses, all disinformation campaign. And we have been thwarting that disinformation campaign in US universities, in UK universities, all the programs where these disinformation is spread like a poison. We take a major role bringing truth about what happened. So this is primarily in a nutshell what Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora has been doing.
Right. Wow. Very inspiring work for sure. But one often wonders, after 3 decades, after undergoing such severe trauma, how the community keeps up their spirits, and how you're able to do all of these things and congregate and take these initiatives. Virinder Kaulji, what are your thoughts on how the community itself comes together and looks ahead?
You can say, and let me again build a small context for it. We have been persecuted for the last 700 years. And this is our 7th exodus. 1990 was the 7th exodus. And we know that truth is our greatest weapon. It is a recorded history. Our culture, if you see our diaspora living any part of the world, they are being embraced by the locals. They are the most, gelling community. We gel very well immediately in a new neighborhood. I will not compare it with any other religion. I don't want to talk about it. You may have heard about Abhinav Gupta, our greatest scholar, who has produced volumes of books on various subjects, including philosophy, and he has written Raj Tarangani. It's a chronicle of the history of Kashmir for I think more than 6 to 7 centuries. Today, you will be happy to know the works of Abhinav Gupta are being studied in more than 20 universities. So this is our background. When Exodus of 1990 happened, it became a threat to our extinction. Our religious and cultural practices, art and music fell into decline as the community scattered across the world in search of a new life. It all took a backseat. Getting a job and paying rents, getting food. There are still some people living in camps. For them, maintaining these religious and cultural practices became a big challenge. You cannot really make a prayer in a tent. So spirits were very low. Most of our community had suffered from depression. Some doctors of our community, without telling them, were treating them for depression. Diabetes became a rampant disease, blood pressure, snake bites in camps, scorpion bites, heat strokes. So if we lost 1,600 people in Kashmir, I think we lost more than that in Jammu and other areas because we could not acclimatize to the weather conditions. So our community has, with single-minded focus, tried to protect our culture and religious practices despite all the odds, in all this hostile atmosphere. You will be happy to know we have some iconic temples in Kashmir, and we connect with it. They are us, and we are them. These temples: Shankaracharya, Kheer Bhavani, Sharika's Mandir, and many more, Baramulla. So what our community has done, despite all the hardships, wherever they were in a majority, like Jammu, Delhi, Faridabad, they have created replicas of these temples. And today, those temples are very, very frequently visited. All our functions are solemnized there. So this is one way of now our religious practices. We have not given up on our Yagnopavit, this sacred practices and marriage. We have our own way of chanting the hymns. So it is still going on. But we are falling short of Kashmiri priests because they are also finding it difficult to survive. So it's a struggle. But so far, okay. And this is what we have done. Keep our spirits high. These replicas of temples, they have become symbols of our existence. They give us sustenance. These replicas, they give us, they keep our spirits high. So initially it was very small, it was a trickle. But as the community has now stabilized over the last 30 years, most of us are in good jobs, made our own houses. So now we are finding that we have some more time and resources to devote to a revival of our cultural practices, our revival of our language and music. So you will see a lot of activities going on in this. And a lot of retired academicians and bureaucrats are devoting their time to coach and guide our students to qualify for competitive exams. We have very bright this progeny, but because of lack of access to the proper tools, they get left behind. So now there are very good institutes opened up in Jagati, like Helpline, Humanity, and so many others. And we give them free coaching. These institutes, GKPD is also supporting them amongst many other organizations. We are also supporting whatever money we can support or tools or whatever, we are doing it. But these retired, we must salute these academicians and bureaucrats who are giving their selfless service to these boys and girls. And we are seeing very good results now. And social media has helped us to reconnect worldwide. And that is where GKPD is acting as a force multiplier. Due to our presence in almost all European countries, Asia, Africa, USA, and Canada, Long lost friends and neighbors are reconnecting. And our social media is, I think, most active in the country. We are cheering and clapping for each other. Once again, we're also exchanging blows in the on the social media. It's okay. We are again, becoming a society, though it's a virtual in the virtual.
Right. Wonderful.
If I may
So,
add to what
yeah.
Virinder ji was saying, for a civilization to remain alive, roots are very important.
Hmm.
The biggest challenge for our community is that we are rootless. We have not been able to connect with that root. If my son or somebody who is outside Kashmir, he goes to Kashmir, he understands the civilization, he connects. So this physical presence, our root, the way we became rootless, has put in a significant challenge and it's become an existential crisis for the community. Now, having said that, I know you asked me the question about on other areas where GKPD is working. You know, we have been working. Kashmiri Pandits, by and large, has been a very peaceful community with tenets of universal brotherhood, peace, harmony, and its focus has been the knowledge. And this community has immensely contributed, not only in India, not only in J&K, to build that state, to build that values, but also its significant and outstanding role in India as well. And all these people, if you see our community who are abroad, they are really a shining example about what they are doing, what they are bringing. So, keeping that thing in mind, it has been very important for India, for world to know about this community. And Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora initiated series of social media educational awareness like Kashmir Festival. We celebrated 1 month long Kashmir Festival where it showcased our culture, our civilization, our contributions, our music, our language, our cuisines, and our politics. Not only that, now um, uh, this visual media has a strong imprint in one's mind. So, keeping that in view, we have in reaching out to Bollywood that somebody has to take ownership and make a movie about the plight of Kashmiri Pandits. What happened with this? We have seen so many Bollywood movies; they do not come up exactly what happened with us. So, our outreach was successful when we reached out to very prominent Bollywood directors, and a movie about Kashmiri Pandit genocide will be showcased. Its shooting is finished. It is by the name of Kashmir Files. Because of the COVID, it's getting delayed. I'm pretty sure it will tell the world about what happened with this. Not only that, also the documentaries in various forms, personal stories. So this is the huge, we are using the technology, the social media to educate and creating mass awareness, not with the intent of hatred, with the intent, history is history. What happened, you cannot deny that. But the intent is not to show down any community or any religion, but it has to say that, see, these are the problems and those problems needs to be rectified. So that is the purpose about our all initiatives.
Right. Wonderful.
Roshanji, sorry, I said Roshanji, sorry.
No problem. Yeah. No, that's really wonderful to hear and very inspiring as well. Let's shift our gaze towards the media, and arguably, the media could have been an ally for the cause actually. But then we see that they're very shy and reticent when it comes to highlighting the ills that have happened with the Kashmiri community, the tragedy that we are talking about, right? Why do you think that is the case? And earlier when we spoke about you said the word genocide is often not used, but then you're pushing for that to be adopted as well. So could you talk to us about the media's treatment of the Kashmiri Pandit exodus itself, and why it hasn't garnered as much attention as maybe similar or comparable tragedies elsewhere?
Roshanji, I must commend you for this question. This is a brilliant question. It is very, very true that what happened with us, the national media, the international media didn't take cognizance of it. Now, international media comes later. National media didn't take cognizance of that. The political governance system did not take cognizance of that. And frankly speaking, we also didn't know what has happened to us. Again, because of technology, lack of communication, it took us so many years to see exactly, to assess what happened with us. And we got to say that this was a pure genocide. You might have heard about Armenian genocide. You might have heard about Rwandan genocide. But nobody knows what happened with Kashmiri Pandits in independent. And the successive governments at the helm of affairs in India kept it under the rug. Possibly, I think that it should not tarnish the image of the country, that it's a progressive country, and this is what happened there. So they didn't want it to leak out. And perhaps India is a secular country, and they might have thought, oh, if we tell the truth, then maybe there will be a backlash. So we became sort of a sacrificial goat so that our news doesn't come. And there was a purported willful communications to the media to blanket. And I will give a small example. When 4 years ago, our logo, our letterhead, everything says acknowledgement of Kashmiri Pandit genocide and ethnic cleansing. Now, when we were initially hammering this genocide, media was not covering it. They were very hesitant to use this word genocide. Now, before I answer that question, if you see the United Nations uh, Convention on Genocide, they have established a full-fledged definition of what is a genocide. Now, let me read it out to you. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, or religious group. As such, there are 5 clauses, and out of 5 clauses, you need to fulfill only one clause. Now, let me read those 5 clauses. It's pretty brief. I will just take 30 seconds. A. Killing members of the group. B. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another. So out of these 5, we are fulfilling 4. There was a plan. There was a plan to convert J&K into a theo-fascist state, and we were a misfit in that. So they planned it because of our faith. Number 2, they did cause, we lost 1,600 members of the family, of our community. And then inflicting all those conditions like destroying the symbols of your civilization, discrimination against jobs, discrimination against all the areas of growth. And then after our genocide and ethnic cleansing, we did see that our birth rate was low, our mortality rate was high, and many people died because of premature deaths, because of snake bites, because of sunstrokes, because of severe diseases that crippled this whole community. So it was purely a genocide, and a genocide. And I'm very happy that after post-abrogation Article 370, there was a question asked to the Union Home Secretary, this direct question, that was it a genocide? He did say that yes, it was a genocide. But on the contrary, when National Human Rights Commission in India uh, uh, told about it, they didn't use the word genocide. They used the word akin to genocide. So there is a full-fledged, willful campaign to put it under the rug, and we will never let that happen. We will make it reach to the world. We are doing it and will continue to do it. Back to your Roshan.
Right. So that could be one of the objectives that you're pursuing at this point of time. Virinder ji, any other objectives that the global Kashmiri diaspora is pursuing at this point of time?
Basically, Roshanji, if you see our problems, our whole community issues, if you crystallize them, they are coming under only three agendas. As Dr. Saab just now said, the first one is establishment of genocide. It is a genocide, it is not akin to genocide. So we are again struggling with NHRC. Let us hope they have again admitted our petition. This is number one. Because once it happens, there will be a proper judicial process to investigate into each and every murder and identify. FIRs have been lodged, but not a single culprit has been imprisoned till date. So that will be a process which will continue till each and every martyr of our community gets justice. We owe it to our older generation who may be with us or they may have already left, but we owe it to them. Second one is return and roadmap for return to the valley. And it should be such a model, it should be, I can say, a resilient model. It should not happen again. See, it has happened 7 times. We should not go back in such a way that after a few 50, 60 years, 100 years, again we are coming. It should never happen again. So we are working with that model, and we hope during the present government's tenure, there will be some cognizance of this roadmap. Third is the protection of our symbols, like religious structures, shrines, and as few of our temples and shrines are protected by the army, BSF, wherever they find that these are the major ones. But we being a very religious community, we had temples in almost every lane, wherever we were living. So those are desecrated, they are demolished, the land has been encroached. And that pressure we are keeping up by a series, barrage of RTIs. And since Governor of LG, Mr. Manoj Sinha has taken over, he is giving serious attention to replies to RTIs. Earlier, you could write 50 RTIs, you wouldn't get a single response. But now we are getting flood of response. So we are building the case. So return roadmap and the protection of our and rehabilitation of our temples and shrines. This is to be done because we owe it our next generation. Otherwise, they will be rootless as we are right now. So all the problems can be encompassed in these three items: establishment of genocide, return roadmap, and the third one is the temples and protection. We are working on various projects. As Dr. Saab just now said, various projects. There are dedicated teams working on it. We're churning out, interacting. So very soon you will be seeing a lot of things coming out from our society, which will be hitting the public attention.
Right. Excellent. So Surinder ji, you mentioned earlier that you engage with the government as well, right? So I wonder if you can talk a little bit more on that, in terms of how you engage with the government of India and other political parties that may be parties or actors who may be relevant in the region.
Yes, we do, because the biggest challenge with our community is that we are minuscule. We are not a vote bank. So with that in mind, even though we are minuscule, but our outreach is very, very wide. We can influence a lot of people beyond Kashmiri Pandit community. And we believe in dialogue, we believe in engagement, and we have been engaging with the political parties, with the government of India, with even political parties in Kashmir. In February of 2019, prior to abrogation of Article 70, we had a political conclave with the Kashmir-centric politicians, and where we had Muzaffar Hussain Beg, who was the Deputy Chief Minister from PDP, and Mr. Rathar, who was a senior most member of National Conference and a finance minister. In fact, we had several others in the panel, but during that time, the Balakot thing started and there was some issues, so other panelists couldn't come in because of the emergency situation that was evolving. Uh, and this is one example, and there I'm glad that Zafar Hussain Beg, the Chief Minister, also very powerfully acknowledged that what happened with the Kashmiri Pandit community was a genocide. So we interact with the current government, as I already mentioned, that we had an interaction with Honorable Prime Minister, with Honorable Home Minister. We have met several leaders. So we meet people from all shapes, from all things. But we are very hopeful that the current government, for the first time, has been giving a right message to the Kashmir-centric politicians, to the people of Kashmir. Um, as I earlier mentioned, there were a lot of uh, wrong messaging from successive governments from government of India to the Kashmir-centric politics, which was emboldening the separatism, the nexus between their Kashmir-centric politicians and the separatists, and to the extent that they had become so emboldened that they were creating a big nexus outside JNK by involving leftists, by involving Maoists. So they were trying to create a huge presence in the universities. We saw that what was happening in JNU and other universities. So that whole messaging was emboldening them every day. I can give you one example that uh, just 4 5 years, 7 8 years ago, uh, Sayyid Ali Shah Jilani, who is the face of the separatists, he arranged and organized an event just 2 miles outside the Indian Parliament, and they were all talking about everything uh, anti-India. This was happening under the nose of government of India at that time. Manmohan Singh Ji was the honorable prime minister. So that was the message. We appreciate this government that it is taking the right step. It is conveying the right message, and it has been trying to break the nexus. As I said, that it had attained the stature of an industry of terrorism. So the money flow, everything now is accountable. They have been able to track that how the money was coming, how hawala was used. So all these things, we are very appreciative of that. Let me use a disclaimer: we are not BJP, we are not this thing, but we are seeing the right step being taken for the first time as regards JNK's consider. So we have been engaging with our think tank also, political system also, apprising them about our aspirations. So this will also again be a constant endeavor.
So just a quick follow-up on that, Surinderji. There was a recent meeting between the Prime Minister and the Kashmiri leaders as well. What do you make of that, and what could be the significance of that?
Yes, again, a brilliant question and very timely, and it is pretty recent. This was the first step that this was the first process of initiating a political dialogue post abrogation Article 37. Now, we being marginalized like other communities, we were expecting that we will also get an audience because uh, it is a meet to discuss about Kashmir, and we being very important stakeholders. Um, Very candidly, I'm saying that the community was sad not to see themselves in the part of that meeting. However, after the meeting was over, to us it looks like that possibly we may not have been a proper fit in that meeting, because I believe that that meeting was organized to convey strong message to the Kashmir-centric politicians to get involved in the electoral processes and set your house in order, and also work in delimitation process so that the discrepancy, the imbalance in the legislative representation is taken care of. I believe that was the message of that meeting, but we were satisfied that our community aspirations were also raised in that meeting. and our delimitation was emphasized. I think it is going in the right direction, and we will support all the good things that government is doing because it is in the best interest of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, best interest for the state, for the UT of Jammu and Kashmir, where all the people will have opportunities to grow.
Right, right. So Surinder ji just mentioned the delimitation term, right? And also, I think in his opening context, I mean, he had talked about how the power was, skewed in a particular sort of with the particular community itself, right? So, do you think, how do you think the delimitation will help the cause of Jammu and that of the Kashmiri Pandits?
I think the imbalance will be restored. For your information, there is a lot of undercurrents going on in Jammu also. Because since this proactive Prime Minister's government is in force in 2014, the people of Jammu also have huge aspiration and expectation from this government. And then they saw this government having an alliance with PDP, with Nagrota Muthi, and she was calling the shots. So they started, initially they just hung on, they had faith. Even now they have faith, but somehow, somewhere they felt that politics is reigning supreme. They must assert their voice and they must ask for their rights. And there is now resentment simmering up. So government is aware of it because this government of India, it's very aware that Jammu is 100% BJP. They cannot let it go. They will lose a huge vote bank and it will have impact on the rest of the country. So the delimitation process will certainly restore, give justice to the Jammu region. Ladakh and Leh and Kargil has already been dispensed with. And as the figures Dr. Saab just now gave, those figures, if you see again, you will realize that what an imbalance it was. The population of Jammu is 53 lakhs. Population of Kashmir is 57 lakhs. Kashmir has 47 seats and Jammu has 36 seats. 11 seats gap for 5 lakh votes, 5 lakh people. What sort of irony is it? So this is, I'm confident, delimitation commission will definitely resolve this anomaly. This will be overcome. And it seems that they will also give political voice to minorities. We may not, being a Hindu, we may not be a minority in India, but in the J&K dispensation, we are a minority. If you see our peculiar cultural and religious practices. So we have been asking for 5 seats for 3 for Kashmiri Pandits, 1 for Punjabi Hindus, who also are substantially large number there, and 1 seat for 6. 5 seats in the assembly is our demand. And we have also asked for 2 seats in the parliament, 1 in Lok Sabha and 1 in Rajya Sabha. So let us hope that this government does justice to it. If it happens, and if the imbalance is restored, these 5 assembly seats, these will play a key role in the making of any government in going in future. Because I think this 47-36 will come closer. These 5 assembly seats, they will be the pivot.
Right. So, before we end the podcast, I think we've covered many different facets, and thank you again for joining us, Surinder ji and Virinder ji. This has been a fascinating conversation. Really, such a pleasure to listen to you. What do you see as the end game for the region as far as India is concerned, Surinder ji?
Well, excuse me. End game, I can say from global Kashmiri Pandit diaspora point of view, and I think the end game, we would like to see that the peace is restored, there is prosperity, there is complete harmony within various sections of the people. All sections of the communities are treated equally through the lens of laws. The Indian Constitution is implemented in letter and spirit. We would like to see the end game where our community again firmly establish its foothold and our civilization again grows. That will be perhaps the victory not only for us but for the people of Jammu and Kashmir, especially the Kashmiris who have been staying through these politicians and separatists that post our genocide. And that will be a real good victory for India, for real good victory for Kashmiris, and real good victory for Kashmiri Pandits. And at the end of the day, we want to ensure that there is a very good transparency, good governance model where these politicians are accountable to their actions. So, in nutshell, that is what we would aspire for, and I believe that must be the priorities for India as well.
Right. Yeah, it's a wonderful note to end the podcast on. Thank you again for joining us. It was a pleasure hosting you. And hopefully, the dream that you articulated comes true sooner than later. And we catch up for a follow-up conversation in more optimistic and better circumstances as well.
Absolutely. Thank you
Yes.
so much for
Thank you
giving
so
us an
much.
opportunity. We are very thankful to you. Have a nice day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot,
Thank you
Mr.
so much.
Vasanji.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Bharat Varta podcast. If you want to see more content like this, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We started Bharat Varta to facilitate long-form discussions on politics, policy, and culture. We don't necessarily endorse anything that was said in this episode. If you wish to offer us feedback, do reach out to us on social media. We are at Bharat Varta on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You could also get in touch with us on our website, www.bharatvarta.in. The links are in the description below. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.